I'm Michael McManus, the director of the Melbourne Guitar Festival, and joined here with Derek Gripper for our next edition of the Melbourne Guitar Festival video podcast series. And super pumped to have you coming to our festival next month, Derek. It'll be really exciting.
Yeah, well done for doing that. I have immense respect for anybody who's stupid enough to organize any music festival of any type, because that's what keeps us all alive. And they're all so incredible when they happen for those 2 or 3 days. But I know it's absolute like hell.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
It's a lot of work, shall we say?
Yeah. So we first met. It was last year at the Adelaide Guitar Festival, and I saw your concert. Or you did a small set in like a gala concert they had, and I thought it was incredible, and I enjoyed it so much. Then when I flew home to Melbourne a couple of days later, I saw you again at the Recital Centre, and you shared a concert with Kaki King, and I was just really blown away by your playing. So I just had to approach you after that and say, come along to our festival next year. What can we do to bring you out? So thanks a lot for accepting my offer, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So I've got a few questions, and we'll just jump straight into them. And anyone watching on Facebook, feel free to jump in with some comments if you have any additional questions you want to ask Derek, and I'll be sure to check them before we finish the interview. So firstly, tell us a little about yourself and your music. You started life as a classical guitarist and then took a very unique path.
Yeah, I'm a classical guitarist. I first learned the violin, and I went from instrument to instrument until I discovered the guitar. And I spent a long time trying to find a repertoire of music that really meant something to me and that really felt like it resonated with where I came from. You know, that it would make sense to play. And really trying to find music that moved me and that I could play on guitar, the kind of music that I was listening to. So that's been my long-term journey, is having this ability to play guitar and finding applications for it that I like.
Yeah, awesome. And what is it about Malian music and the kora that draws you to it? Because you exclusively, or not exclusively, I should say, because you do some other wonderful works by Bach and other things I've heard you play, but you play so much Malian music and arrangements of the kora, the West African harp. What is it about that music that really draws you into it?
Well, when I discovered Tumani, I was playing, as I said, I was playing classical guitar, and I wanted to find an application for this ability, and to play a music that I loved. And when I heard Tumani Diabate play the kora, I heard somebody who was a virtuoso solo string player, playing an incredible, magical African music. And of course, the dream was to be able to do a similar thing on guitar. And I attempted that in various ways over about a decade, recording solo albums of music inspired by people like Tumani Diabate, also Egberto Gismonti from Brazil, and always going backwards and forth from Bach and other things. And it never, then I realized that you could actually approach this even more directly than being influenced, that you could actually treat Tumani as a composer and his recordings as scores. And that kind of opened up a whole language and repertoire for me, where I started transcribing his music. So I still perform a lot of these transcriptions that I did now about 8 years ago, and first released on the album One Night on Earth. But I also still use what I've learned through those transcriptions to write my own music and to do further transcriptions of other composers that I really love, like Bach or Ava Pat or Egberto Gismonti, that type of thing. But Tumani Tumani and the kora is classical guitar music in Africa. It's really, it fits so beautifully, and I don't know why.
And for those listening that perhaps don't know exactly what the kora is, do you want to explain a little bit about what that instrument entails, what it's made up of, or?
The core is a 21-string harp. It's one of the newer instruments of the musicians called the griots, who are the courtly musicians, shall we say, of the Manding Empire in West Africa. So the core is probably only 200 or 300 years old in its present form, and much older instrument like the balafon, which is a wooden xylophone, has been played for probably 800 years or something. So the core is like a newcomer on that scene, a little bit like the classical guitar.
Yeah.
It's classical guitar in its present form is also only about 200 or maybe 300 years old, and and so it's a gourd resonated harp. It has 21 strings, large, big gourd, and the soundboard of the gourd is a skin.
Yeah, full on. And how do you approach arranging for such music from such an instrument, from the 21 strings to a 6-string classical? Must be quite a challenge.
Well, I had to. So as I said in the beginning, when I was listening to Tumani, I didn't understand what he was doing. It sounded impossible. There's multi-rhythms going on at the same time. It sounds like the lines are very independent, and it seemed like you would need something like a harp guitar to be able to keep those kind of accompaniments going at the same time as doing these kind of virtuosic lines. But at about 2011, I started playing the vihuela tablatures of Narvaez and other composers. I got a CD-ROM at the time of the original tablatures, and I spent quite a long time immersing in this early style of guitar playing, which is really like using the guitar like a 6-string harp, where you can shorten the strings. There's not very many bar chords or going out of the first position. It's really about open strings against closed strings all the time, and that kind of conditioned me to think about the guitar in a different way. And I've been writing like that as well. And then one day I came across a piece by Viu Farcature on YouTube playing just solo guitar, and I worked out how to play that. And that sort of one thing led to another, and I actually had the idea of slowing the music down, which I'd never done before. And then I could actually hear what they were doing for the first time. And I could hear that actually it was very, very classical kind of phrasing, sequences that you would hear in Mozart,
Yeah.
So once it was slowed down, then I could sit with the guitar, and I decided, right, I'm not going to use the guitar like a normal guitar. I'm going to retune the recording. I'm going to retune the guitar strings. I'm going to change it with a capo until I find them kind of linking together. Yeah. And that's what I did. So in the beginning, I had about 7 different tunings for different pieces, and eventually I came across one tuning that worked for them all. And then the actual transcription process is just really painstaking, note by note, taking one phrase, looping it on the program, and listening to it and writing it down, and then going to the next one and the next one and the next one, and just sort of inchworming yourself through the piece like that. And in the beginning it was very slow because I didn't know the language. Now it's very quick because I know the language, I know what they're doing, and immediately. But it still is kind of painstaking process.
Wow. And for any budding guitarists or watching that want to perhaps play some of your transcriptions, you've got them available on your website?
Yeah, I'm actually going at the moment back and retranscribing and renotating a lot of the original pieces. I'm kind of just consolidating things, and there were some of the pieces that I recorded on One Night on Earth where I hadn't completed the transcription. I'd done a minute or two, and then I used that as my own composition. So I've been, over the last month or two, I've been going back and retranscribing, and also seeing, what have I learned? How would I do this now? And so those are constantly being published on my website. There's quite a lot of compositions there, and I'm also trying always to make versions with different levels of difficulty, because the wonderful thing about this music is that you can create a version of a piece for an absolute beginner and something that's unplayable by anybody.
That's great. I've got a question in 2 parts. This is from one of our followers on Facebook, Russ, he commented, in the early days, how did you convince yourself to push through with your own ideas rather than following accepted paths? And do you have hints for people trying to follow their own voice and promote their own compositions, etc.?
Well, I was lucky. I had the luxury of living in South Africa, where I had very few paths that I could follow. So I often see that as really the benefit of having, done most of my work and preparation and learning very far from most other guitarists, like not being in a sort of center where there was loads of things happening. And if I got interested in kora, I could go down the road because there were 5 kora players living there. This isolation in a way, because of what I chose to do, not being very much around me, meant that I could just quietly get on with what I was doing. And there was no temptation to do anything normal, because there wasn't anything normal to do.
Yeah.
And then in terms of recommendations, I don't know, it's a very bewildering world at the moment, the world of music, and guitar is even more of a niche thing, which can be great, I think. And I've followed a very simple thing, which is I do what I'm interested in when I'm interested in it, and I kind of don't do what I'm not interested in. And when I'm doing something that I'm interested in, I share it immediately in whatever form it is. I don't get perfectionist and think, I could have spent 10 years learning those, like Casals did with the cello suites. He didn't record them until he was in his 70s. I could have done that with the kora things and said, there's no way that I can record this. I'd been playing the music for about 8 months when I made One Night on Earth, and that started the conversation going. And I think that's the important. So you've just got to start the conversation, and we have perhaps too many ways to share things these days. So this it's very easy to share music, and not so easy to monetize it anymore. Recordings. I was lucky to be part of the golden age of digital monetization, which is now over.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just making it up as we go along, and the rules are changing constantly. 5 years ago, it was very exciting to give digital downloads away for any price and to work in a gratitude economy. Now there's no such thing as digital downloads, and that's gone. So now we're working in other contexts. So it's always changing. But I think it's to find an integration between what you're interested in, what you're doing, and how you're sharing it, and just to make that like a fluid thing, and to trust that what you're sharing in all its half perfection is of interest to people, because perfection is highly overrated, and I think most people have realized that now, and what we want is to see people in their real process and what they're doing, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do all the time.
I definitely couldn't agree more. I think one thing that a lot of classical musicians in particular can get really caught up in these days is learning a program, playing it for years, as you said, Pablo Casals, before actually doing a recording, and we miss out on what music is all about, which is just sharing with people. And I think it's great what you're doing.
The freshness of a new piece. And there's a piece called Lampedusa on my album Libraries on Fire, and I actually pretty much sight read that piece for the recording, and I still to this day can't even play it.
Yeah.
and that was great, and there are other things that of course they develop over time, and what's wonderful about recording is it records that development over time, and I think repertoire is not something that you develop over time to get to the perfect point. It's a thing that keeps going, and each point is worthwhile, which brings us back to the idea of a beginner score versus a Jedi score. The beginner score, you're playing music, it doesn't get better than that. Anything that's more complex is just for your own enjoyment. But the act of playing the first 8 notes of the piece round and round that's as good as guitar playing gets. And if you don't like it, well then don't do it. It's not going to get any better after you practice 8 hours a day.
Great. And you were mentioning a little bit earlier about digital downloads and in the golden age of perhaps CD sales and all of that. Yeah, I wonder, could you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on how musicians nowadays can monetize or sell their music, either with CDs, online streaming, digital downloads, or I noticed you're doing vinyl recordings these days. What are your thoughts on the different platforms and online streaming and all those things?
I mean, I think it differs from genre to genre, and definitely vinyl is not so big in the classical world. And I kind of straddle these different worlds. I found a great way to get people to buy vinyl is not to bring CDs. So I've recently allowed myself. I held back for years. Of getting involved in this vinyl thing, the vinyl revival or whatever it is. But I decided to take the plunge a few months ago, and I have really had the most fun as a music listener that I have had in years. It has been the most wonderful and rewarding and beautiful and inspiring experience, and it has really inspired me again to record albums. I used to go to the studio as one of my favorite things to do, spend 2 days just deep diving. I used to go to a studio about 4 hours away in the countryside, in a farm called Piece of Eden, and just not sleep for 3 days and record and edit. And it was the most wonderful process. And after the last few years, after that process was finished, I would just leave it on my hard drive because I wasn't really inspired about how to get it out to people. You can just slap it up onto Spotify, etc. But it wasn't that fun. It used to be fun when you could put something out and then reach people, and then you would get response, and it started a conversation. And listening to vinyl again has really made me excited about that. And I've had some musical experiences on vinyl, where I've realized that there's a spatial element, and I'm not even going to go into this too long because I know how contentious it is. But I think we think about it in terms of resolution and all that, and how high definition the music is. But of course, we're looking as usual in the wrong direction. What's really amazing about vinyl and analog recordings is the spatial element, and acoustic music really benefits from that, in an amazing way. I just got a copy of Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes, and there's a second track on the first disc where he's singing into the microphone, he's got his guitar, and it's really the most incredible sounding recording I've ever heard. It's just so unbelievably beautiful, and you can hear it on iTunes, and it's flat. It's still beautiful. The performance is there, but that spatial quality. And I suppose the one remnant of my classical guitar training is that I am very interested in sound as well as the music. Even though I listened to music without a stereo for years, what does move me is great sound. And when I have a wonderful sound at a gig, it's a totally different thing, and you're almost playing with sound, and that's one of the very beautiful things, just to recapture that in listening. And I know this is old news for a lot of people, but it's been a great excitement for me. As far as the other forms go, I'm not such an expert really. I really love the digital download Bandcamp moment, and Bandcamp is still there. It's much less now because most people have some sort of streaming service or another. People who buy music on Bandcamp, buy musicians, are supporting the music in one of the most direct and fabulous ways that you can. So it's people who do still download music or buy it on physical. That's keeping this art form alive essentially. Streaming is never going to work for us in its current model. It's music in the age of mass production already didn't hugely work for us. This idea that an artwork is reproduced 1 million times and that's where your product is, as opposed to a printmaker who would do an edition of 30, or something, and that could be valuable. The whole model of recorded music is about mass production, and Spotify has just taken this to the absolute extreme. And someone like myself, even though my streaming levels are quite high for a classical guitarist, it's not even such a negligible income that it's not the kind of thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning to the recording studio and to record. And it's certainly not going to pay back the recording costs, anytime soon. So that's a pity, but it's radio. I suppose we think of it as radio, and we have to access people in different ways. I'm finding actually sheet music is a much better source of direct connection and income than than recording. So I've gone back to 1925.
Yeah.
Which is great because it's tapping into the fact that people want to be part of the experience, and I really believe in that. I really feel that the recording age, for all its wonders, took away that experience of I make music myself. And I can make music. It created this idea of unattainable perfection, which was either fake or due to someone having just that focus. So I think sheet music and methods and it gets people playing, and that's even better than listening to listening to.
It's great. And you were mentioning a little bit just before about how important sound is to you when you perform and record. And I do know that you travel with a very special microphone with you all over the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that microphone is that you use, why that's so special?
Yeah, classical guitar is a really difficult instrument to amplify. It's like the double bass is also very difficult. The reason being that there's a similar reason to why vinyl sounds so great. There's a kind of space in between the attack and the creation of the sound in a classical guitar that if you amplify directly from the instrument, even at a very high definition, perfect pickup, and I've tried a million of them, you lose that kind of loose bounce, that sort of delayed reaction that a classical guitar gives you, and that space between things. Similarly, if you're listening to Led Zeppelin on vinyl and you hear that reverb on the snare and the reverb on the vocal and the guitar's direct, you can hear all those separate acoustic spaces. So that's something that I've tried to maintain, and so you end up always going back to having to use microphones. This is maybe not a problem for classical guitarists who are playing in concert halls, whose main question is, do I use a microphone or do I play unamplified?
Yep.
But I'm playing in very different venues. I'm playing in outdoor stages of world music festivals. I'm playing in concert halls, different things. So I needed something. And I've tried lots of different things over the years, and I've ended up with just one microphone. I've taken the pickup out of my guitar because it was killing a lot of the upper partials, and that was messing with my zen quite a lot, I discovered. So I have this Roya. Roya is a company who's, reinvigorating old ribbon microphones. Ribbon microphones were the microphones that Segovia would have been recording on, but they were very low output, and they were very fragile. If you speak into a ribbon microphone, you blow it. And if you close a door, or if you give it phantom power, or, so they were certainly not something you could ever use live. But there's been a lot of new technology and a lot of re-look at them by various companies. And I first discovered them through AEA, who make a really great active ribbon, very affordable. I've got into Roya. They make an amazing one that I use. It's a 122. It's got phantom power, so you're getting a lot of output, and you don't have to carry extra preamps. And the amazing thing about it is your difficulty always with amplifying the guitar is the feedback problem. And a high frequency microphone like the Neumann that everybody uses, the KM184. That's a condenser microphone, has a very high frequency response, and that means it's actually going to feed back on the high frequencies pretty quickly. Plus, it gives a very brittle sound. To my view, it's too high definition for the classical guitar, so you get this kind of breaking glass sound that you have to kind of EQ. Ribbon mics, when I first heard them, I realized this is what my guitar sounds like. There's a little bit of that bounce that I was looking for. There's the warmth. It emphasizes the bass textures really well. Maybe too much for some people, but you can roll off bass rather than giving it, in the EQ. And the feedback happens only in the bass frequencies and actually sub-bass frequencies. So when you have to ring the mic out on stage, you can ring out bass frequencies that are not even in the guitar. and that'll take your level really high, as opposed to a condenser where you've lost your whole top end by the time you've got to that same volume. That's been my very, very kind of uninformed experience. I've experimented and taken, because the Roya is a figure of 8 microphone. It shouldn't work. It's a figure of 8 ribbon. It shouldn't work on stage, but it absolutely does.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been using. Roya 122. Yeah.
It's incredible. And you said that's a microphone that Segovia would have used, or a ribbon microphone for his recordings and that.
Those diaphragm ribbons, yeah.
Yeah. And you also play a guitar that Segovia would have played as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your guitar and strings that you use?
Segovia.
Yeah.
My guitar is a Herman Hauser 3, which is the grandson of the man who made Segovia's guitar from, that he played around the 40s and 50s. And then there was an accident and he didn't get it fixed properly, and he became very Spanish nationalist and decided not to carry on playing a German guitar and went back to Ramirez. And the result of that was that in the 70s, everyone played Ramirez, and they played them very big as well. They had very big scale length, 66 and up. And you had people with little hands trying to stretch on these massive guitars. And, the Hauser instrument has got a short scale length, 65. It's very easy to play. And they're beautiful instruments. Mine is made in 2003, as I said, by the grandson. It's called a special edition because it's the same model as Segovia's, and it's also made with the same block of spruce from that same store as Segovia's one. So you can, it's channeling there, and it's a beautiful instrument because it's very it's kind of like it's got a built-in compressor. You know what a compressor does? It kind of holds the sound and kind of just keeps everything contained. And I find with a lot of new classical guitars, because they're trying to emphasize volume over everything else, there's a lot of overtones, there's a lot of upper partials, and there's a lot of kind of like echo, And what Hauser does is he takes all that stuff and he kind of packs it into the note, and he sends it out in kind of a beam, a very focused beam. So actually, paradoxically, unamplified, it has a great push. You can play it live in a concert next to a Smallman, which is like 5 times louder when you're sitting next to it. But once you're 5 or 10 meters out, they balance out. It's got this kind of very nice projection, and it works really well in a microphone because it doesn't have all this fuzz, this harmonic fuzz, and it's just focused. It really lets the microphone rumble, and similarly with the ribbon, it moves beautifully, so you start to hear combination tones, and it's very special in a very subtle way, which is why putting a pickup in it has been very difficult, because it's got so little overtone. When you take away that tiny 1 dB of overtone, you kill that very thing, and you ask yourself for a year, is it missing that? No, it's not, is it? And then you take it out and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
So it's a very subtle thing, and the best thing about it, though, is it's incredibly easy to play. I haven't practiced guitar in 15 years because you don't have to, because there's nothing, it doesn't buzz. There's nothing you have to avoid. I remember in my old guitars, you always had to avoid. There were like no-way zones where you had to kind of back off a bit. You knew you're getting to the 6th fret on the 5th string, you had to be careful, or whatever it was, This guitar, it goes anywhere you want it, so you don't have to think about that. And the compressor feel is amazing, because if I hit a guitar very hard, it can quack at me, it can make this kind of ugly sound, whereas this instrument, you can hit it as hard as you want, you can do whatever, and it'll always round it off and make it something beautiful, which actually was frustrating in the beginning until I really played it in over about 10 years. It was a little bit too perfect, and it was difficult to make it dirty, but now it's really opened up in an amazing way, and I get a shock when I play modern guitars, because I have to be so careful, because a lot of the things I do, if I whack the bass like that, then it kind of freaks out, and whereas this just holds inside, and so it gives me a huge amount of physical freedom that I haven't found on another instrument.
Incredible. And I picked up, you mentioned before about perhaps when you play your guitar next to a Smallman, when you're standing out there, they kind of sound equal in projection. And for those who don't know, Smallman guitars is the instrument that John Williams plays, and they're renowned for being very loud and resonant guitars. And you've had a little bit of experience with John Williams, and there's a great quote from him which I love, and he says, "I thought it was impossible until I heard Derek do it." And I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with John? And I believe you have played in duo with him before. So that might be what you were alluding to when you said playing your guitar next to a Smallman, because you've had that as a first-hand experience with John.
I thought it was impossible. What, John? What was impossible? Tell us. Yeah, John does play a Smallman, and we've done 3 sets of concerts together. So 5. I think we did 1 concert the first year, 1 the next year, and 2 together. So yeah, we've done 4 concerts together, and I was very worried the first time because we were in his room at home practicing, and his guitar is really, really loud, and he's John Williams, you know, and we were amplified for the first concert, so that wasn't a problem. But the next year, when we came back, and the venue was Shakespeare's Globe, it's the mini Globe, it's built on next to the Globe. We were one of the first music events there. It's such a beautiful hall, 350-seater recreation of a Shakespearean theatre, but not the outdoor theatre for the rabble. It was kind of an indoor seated theatre. And that, we did the second one unamplified, and that worried me because I couldn't hear myself in the rehearsal. You know, it's so powerful, and the bass is so powerful, but they balanced out, you know, in reality, which was good. Or maybe John was just polite and kept it down for me. I don't know. So that collaboration came about because on a whim I sent him a copy of One Night on Earth when I first recorded it, because I knew that he had an interest in African music and had made that record, the Music Box. Music Box?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Sorry, John. Yeah. I do remember. The Magic Box. It's the Magic Box. And where he plays a Mandinka kora arrangement with John Etheridge and a few other things. So I sent it to him, and it just so happened at that time he was busy making a program for this John Williams and Friends 5 nights at the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, the Globe Theatre in London.
Yeah.
And so I got an email from the organizers like a few days after he got the thing. Would you like to play with John Williams? And I was living really at the southernmost point of South Africa at that time. I didn't have any internet. I remember I was actually driving my car at the time with my laptop open on the passenger seat, waiting for signal. And this is the email that popped up as I sort of went into Wi-Fi signal and saw this mail. And I wasn't playing outside of South Africa much. I'd stopped doing that. Not that I had been doing it very much, but I'd stopped it completely. And it was quite an amazing invitation to get. And we only played 1 piece together. He said, you know, the idea was that it was kind of a double bill. I was opening with 1 half solo, and then him and John Etheridge were playing. But then he said, you know, would it be okay if we played a piece together? And I said, sure, you know, absolutely. So we did I sent him the score for Jarabi, and he learned his part, and then I improvised another part, and John Etheridge improvised another part, and we did that as a finale. And then he said, well, how about we do it again next year, but do you mind if we do more duets? So I actually got together with a guitarist here in Cape Town called Reza Kota, who's a wonderful classical guitarist turned jazz guitarist, and we wrote duets based on, you know, the music that I'd recorded on One Night on Earth and Libraries on Fire by that point. And we did those. And then we got invited to play another concert for the Songlines Encounters Festival, which I've just done again a few weeks ago with Debashish Bhattacharya, the Indian slide guitarist. So that's kind of how that came about. And it was a really fun and rewarding and wonderful experience because, you know, John is an amazingly positive and joyful character when it comes to the guitar. You know, he's like a 9-year-old boy. in his kind of interest and excitement at the instrument, and he has such an amazing, what humility sounds, but he's just, he would ask me things like, so what do you do to practice that? And, and I've been struggling a lot with this thing, and how do you play that? And I'd be like, oh, actually, I leave that part out. And, so he was really like, he's just learning, he's got a real openness and a real kind of joy for learning. And it's really nice to see and to experience that. And if you close your eyes and hear him play and realize, oh, this is John Williams. Because if I see him, it doesn't feel like John Williams because I've never seen him before. But if he played to me over the phone, or if I was backstage while he was doing his solo show, then you suddenly realize this is John Williams. And it was really beautiful to hear him. I wasn't expecting it. And then he went on for his solo, and I was sitting on the stairs behind the door, and suddenly you're hearing John Williams that you've listened to countless hours on recordings. And, he's remarkable.
Must be, incredible experience doing that. And
I think the interesting thing, just to add, I think the interesting thing about John is that, his type of playing became kind of the standard of how the classical guitar should be played. And I think he finds this very frustrating because that's his personality, how he plays. But he really loves other ways of playing. Yeah. And I think he's really struggled over his life to get that message across. This is how I play. It doesn't have to be how you play. This kind of, he's a perfectionist. He would say to me, "Do you mind if I leave this note out because there's a slight buzz that only I can hear on this string?" And he's like that. And that's just who he is. But and he finds it frustrating that sort of became what was important for all guitarists. And that's what I think is really it was really great to meet him and chat to him about things like that. Like, John, do you plan the right hand like I am? Do you write it into the score? He goes, never. I said, I see you doing, and I saw him. I said, you're doing repeated I fingers there. What the hell, John? You can't do that. And he's like, no, of course, I do that all the time. And I said, well, have you told the classical guitar world about it, John? We've been suffering out here. And he goes, in one ear, out the other.
That's good. I was also going to ask, are there any recordings or anything that we can hear you and John together? Because it would be really incredible moments to have captured. Do they exist anywhere?
Well, John has a very interesting policy about this. He really feels that having any form of recording or video during a performance is a kind of insult to the audience, because those are the people who've committed to pay and come and watch him play. And he feels that having a kind of disturbance there, but also sharing that experience outside of that is kind of an insult. I'm not 100% sure I completely agree, because one of my favorite recordings is the Cologne concert by Keith Jarrett. Thank God they had microphones there.
Yeah.
So he also felt, being the perfectionist that he is, this completely the opposite of what I was saying earlier about releasing things as they go. He felt that he needed to settle more in the music, and this was a new style for him, and he, because the Globe wanted us to record the arrangements, and I also felt that we experimented with those arrangements, and I learned a lot, and I would redo them completely differently when we play again. So there is absolutely no record of us playing together. It's completely a figment of my imagination.
It's a shame we miss out on that, but
actually, you know what? There's some video footage of us sound checking at King's Place. Mats Helm is the Swedish filmmaker who's filming the footage for a documentary about my interaction with Marley. It's at the moment it's just collating footage. He doesn't have any sort of plan with it. But he was in Mali with me, and he came to that, and he was allowed to film us in the sound check, and we may have even played something. So
oh wow!
At some point something will pop up where we're actually playing 5 seconds of a piece. I don't know, and I can show my grandchildren because they won't care.
That's great. And talking about vinyl earlier, I was going to ask, would you be able to expand a little bit on what your vinyl collection is like? What type of music do you love listening to and collecting?
Well, I have, I really stopped myself from buying vinyl because I understood that it was not a safe financial thing to get involved in. And I have 3 children that I need to bring up and send through school. And so I just felt that it was an irresponsible thing to do. But they're reaching towards teenage now. I mean, they are teenagers, and I think I can send them off, to start earning their own living a little bit. And so I thought that maybe I deserved to be able to do this. So I started only 3 months ago. I've brought about 70 records back from the UK because I did 3 trips to the UK over the last few weeks, and it's just things. I've mostly been getting things that are special to me that I don't have in physical and I don't have in vinyl. Things like the Kong concert by Keith Jarrett, and some Ravi Shankar, a beautiful one where he describes the tabla, and been getting a lot of Dylan, like the bootleg sessions and his early albums, Joni Mitchell, those kind of acoustic, intimate acoustic recordings, John Lee Hooker. I finally found, in my last trip, I found a copy of Casal's cello suites, the box set of all of them, which I've always wanted. Found a beautiful, that reissue of Sgt. Pepper's has been really mind-blowing, and I've discovered the sort of sonic side of the Beatles, and actually really got an appreciation for, what's his name, Paul McCartney, which I never had before, as much as a bass player. Wow. Vilayat Khan, sitar player, India. Yeah, a lot of like, different things, and now I'm also finding some Cora recordings that you can't get digitally. One of my favorite players was recording in the 60s and 70s, I think, Jelly Nyama Soso, and I've just bought 3 of his records, which I don't even know if I've heard. They're coming, one from Sweden, and so things like that. Yeah, and I've had to buy, when my children are, a part of this experiment as well. So we bought some Ed Sheeran and Amy Winehouse and John Legend. They have requests. Even one of them requested Guns N' Roses. Bought some early 90s grunge as well, Pearl Jam. I was a bit disappointed, though, by the sound of Guns N' Roses and Pearl Jam on vinyl so far. I need to check up on this, but I don't know if it's the pressings or the fact that this was sort of the digital recordings, but they haven't been sounding. Everything else has been a revelation sonically. But Pearl Jam 10 is one of my all-time favorite records, and it's underwhelming. So I need to find out if that's just, I'm not an expert on, what pressings to get, or maybe there's something in my setup, or maybe grunge just didn't sound great. I mean, that was the whole point. I don't know.
It's great. Well, yeah, really appreciate your time and joining us today. It's been, a really remarkable chat, and I've learnt a lot. And it's really great insights you've been able to share. So thanks very much for doing this. And
thanks, mate.
Yeah, I'll probably sign off on the live stream now. But thanks again, and really looking forward to having you play. September 21st will be your concert. Which
is my daughter's birthday, so you have to feel equally honoured.
Wow!
Celebrating her birthday in another country, that's 7 hours away. She's not impressed.
I'm feeling bad now. We're taking you away from her on her birthday. That's terrible.
We'll do an early birthday. We're flexible. We have birthday weeks, so it's fine.
That's good. Well, we'll make sure we'll think of her on that night and wish her a happy birthday. So thanks again for joining us, Derek, and we'll just say bye to everyone watching on Facebook or YouTube. So thanks very much.